The last wedding bill came to my email at 9:12 on Friday morning. $68,340, not counting the florist deposit and the photographer Claire said was impossible to replace. The venue called it a final balance. I called it the last thing I could do quietly. My daughter never asked for that much in one sentence. She built it with small pauses. The tasting menu was set. Evan's family had invited people from his company. Cutting the bar package now would look cheap. Each time Claire said, "Dad, I hate asking," I heard Nina's last week voice telling me not to leave our girl alone in the world. So I paid. I saved the receipt, printed it, and slid it into the blue folder with the planner contract, the photographer invoice, and the shuttle charge. I marked each page with the date the way I used to mark inspection forms, not because I expected a fight, because paper remembers calmly. At noon, Claire texted a heart and 3 words, "You're the best." Then she sent the seating chart. Evan's parents were at table 1. His boss, Richard Klein, sat with the project directors at table 2. I found Warren Hale at table 17, near the hallway to the restrooms. For a while, I only looked at it. Not father of the bride, not dad, just Warren Hale, printed small enough to be polite. I put the chart in the folder too and decided not to call her before the ceremony. The wedding was at a hotel outside Philadelphia that called itself a country estate because there were stone columns out front and a lawn wide enough for pictures. When I pulled up, a valet opened my door before I could reach for the handle. He saw the old inspection sticker on my windshield, then the black suit bag in the back seat and said, "Vendor entrance is around the side, sir." "I'm the bride's father," I told him. His face changed fast. "Sorry, sir, of course." I tipped him anyway. It was not his fault Claire had built a day where the man paying the balance looked more like hired help than family. Inside, the lobby smelled of lilies and expensive candles. Madeline Ross, the planner, crossed toward me with a tablet pressed to her chest. She was kind, efficient, and terrified of late changes. "Mr. Hale, Claire's almost ready. She asked me to have you wait near the ballroom until family pictures." "Not with her?" Madeline glanced at her tablet, as if the answer had been typed there by God. "She wants a quiet room. Makeup, nerves. You know." I did know. I knew my daughter could face a room of 200 people, but not 10 minutes alone with the father who had paid for the room. I carried the blue folder under my arm and walked past the escort card table. My card sat near the back of the alphabet, plain and correct. Warren Hale. No little gold ribbon like Evan's parents had. No note that said Dad. Claire came down the side stairway 20 minutes later in a dress that made 3 bridesmaids stop breathing. For 1 second, I saw the little girl who used to stand on my boots in the garage while I cleaned concrete dust out of my hair. Then she saw me, checked over her shoulder, and gave me a smile meant for photographs. "Dad, you look nice," she said. "Very classic." Classic was the word she used when she did not want to say old. I kissed her cheek without touching the makeup. "You look like your mother." That almost reached her. Her eyes moved, softened, then slid back toward the photographer. "We're doing first look shots with Evan's parents first. Madeline has the order." "I can wait." I said it too quickly. That was my habit with Claire. Make the sacrifice before she had to ask. Remove the weight from her voice. Become easy. From the far end of the lobby, Evan waved at me with 2 fingers and turned back to a tall man in a navy suit. I recognized Richard Klein from company articles Claire had forwarded when Evan got promoted. Richard laughed at something Evan said, then looked past me without interest. To him, I was only an older man near the flowers. Nina would have touched my sleeve then. She would have said, "Warren, don't shrink before they ask you to." But Nina had been gone 4 years, and the promise I made at her hospital bed still sat heavier than my pride. Take care of her. Don't let bitterness raise her after I'm gone. So I waited by the ballroom doors with the folder under my arm and let the day pass through me like I was part of the building. The ceremony itself was beautiful. That is the uncomfortable truth. Claire walked alone for the first 20 feet because she wanted a modern entrance, then let me meet her halfway. The guests saw me for 12 steps. I gave her hand to Evan, heard the officiant say family and support, and stood back before anyone had to decide where to put me. At the reception, table 17 was exactly where the chart promised. Close enough to hear the kitchen doors swing, far enough that the sweetheart table looked like a display in a store window. A cousin of Nina's sat beside me and whispered, "I thought you would be up front." "Claire had a lot to arrange," I said. That sentence did more work than most men do in a day. The meal came out on time. The wine was better than anything I bought for myself. Guests praised the flowers, the band, the little late-night slider station Claire had almost canceled until I covered it. I watched them enjoy things my name was not attached to. I did not need a speech. I did not need a spotlight. I wanted one ordinary sign that my daughter knew the difference between a father and a funding source. Instead, Evan's mother stopped at our table and said, "You must be very proud. Claire planned such an elegant evening." "She did," I said. I looked at the blue folder on the empty chair beside me. The receipts inside were not weapons yet. They were just proof that love, when hidden long enough, begins to look like nobody's effort. After dinner, Madeline moved through the room with the schedule face people wear when joy has to stay on time. The best man spoke first. He joked about Evan answering work emails on a ski lift and got a clean laugh from the company tables. Evan's father spoke next and thanked both families while looking mostly at his own. I clapped because the words were not false. They were only incomplete. Then Madeline came to Claire with the wireless microphone. My daughter stood, glowing under the warm lights, one hand on Evan's shoulder. She looked toward table 17 and smiled at me. For half a second, I let myself believe she had saved something for the end. Maybe not a tribute, just one sentence. My dad helped make this possible. My dad showed up for me. My dad. Claire tapped the microphone. "Okay," she said, laughing before anyone else did. I promised I would tell one funny family story, and Dad, you have to be a good sport. The room turned toward me with friendly faces, hungry for a safe old man joke. Evan leaned back in his chair, smiling as if he already knew the punchline. Richard Klein, at table 2, lifted his glass without looking away from Claire. I put one hand on the blue folder so it would not slide from the chair. I smiled because 200 people were watching, because Nina had raised me better than to bruise my daughter on her wedding night, and because I still did not understand that the bruise had already been chosen. "You all know my dad is not exactly a fancy person," Claire said, and the room gave her the soft laugh people give a bride before they know whether she has earned it. "I mean that with love. Dad can find a code violation in a hotel napkin fold." More laughter. I kept my smile where it belonged, small and harmless. "When I was little," she went on, "other kids' dads came home with briefcases. My dad came home smelling like concrete dust and arguing with contractors on the phone about bolts, cables, fire ratings, whatever else could ruin dinner." The company table laughed louder at that. Evan turned in his chair and lifted his glass toward me, a gesture that looked affectionate from a distance. Up close it said, "Be a sport." Claire warmed to the room. "And you have to understand, Dad never really learned how to enjoy nice things. If you gave him a 5-star restaurant, he'd inspect the exit signs before he ordered. If you gave him a vacation, he'd ask who approved the deck railing." I heard Nina's cousin shift beside me. I did not look at her. I looked at my daughter in the dress I had helped pay for, and reminded myself that brides exaggerate, guests laugh, fathers absorb. "So if tonight looks a little more polished than the Hale family garage," Claire said, "you can thank Evan for rescuing me from a lifetime of folding chairs, expired permits, and Dad's famous coupon lasagna." That laugh was different. It had teeth in it. People who had never seen my garage, never eaten at my table, and never watched me drive Claire to school after a night shift, now had permission to imagine all of it as charming failure. A few turned toward me. I nodded once, like a man accepting a toast. Claire saw the room leaning in and kept going. "Dad always told me he chose principle over money, which sounds noble, right? But when you're a teenager and your friends are going to beach houses and your dad is explaining why a used Corolla is a perfectly respectable car, principle feels a lot like being broke." Evan did not laugh loudly. That would have been easier to hate. He smiled with his mouth closed and looked down at his plate, the way men look when a joke is useful but not theirs. His hands stayed on Claire's lower back. He did not squeeze her shoulder. He did not whisper enough. "I love him," Claire said, lifting her free hand toward me. "I do. He taught me to work hard. He taught me to read the fine print." Then she smiled toward Evan. "He also taught me that if I wanted centerpieces that didn't come from a hardware store bucket, I might need to marry someone with more imagination." The guests laughed again. Table 2 laughed because Evan's boss was laughing politely. I kept my eyes on Claire. The folder under my hand felt heavier, as if every paid invoice inside had heard its own funeral. She should have stopped there. A clean joke leaves room for love to walk back in. Claire did not leave room. "The funniest part," she said, "is that Dad still thinks every choice is a building inspection." She turned the room with her hand. "When Evan and I were looking at townhouses, Dad sent me a crawlspace checklist. Not congratulations. Not I'm happy for you. A checklist." I had sent that list because the first house had water staining on the joists. I had also told her I was happy. She had answered with a thumbs up. "So tonight," Claire said, "I want to thank my father for teaching me what not to become too scared of." She lifted the glass higher. "I don't want to spend my life saying no to every risk. I don't want to miss the beautiful thing because I'm worried about the permit." Something moved at table 2. Richard Klein had stopped smiling. His glass, halfway to his mouth, stayed there. At first I thought he had noticed the cruelty and was embarrassed for us. Then his eyes narrowed on Claire. "Did she say hail?" he asked someone beside him. The woman next to him leaned closer. Claire, hearing none of it, raised her glass toward me. "To Dad," she said. "The safest man in any room, and the reason I knew I needed a little danger in my life." 200 people looked at me. I smiled because that was the only thing left that belonged to me. Madeline started clapping first, the way planners do when they need a room to move past a dangerous second. The bridesmaids followed. Evan stood and kissed Claire's temple. The kiss looked tender from table 17. From where I sat, I saw his eyes slide toward Richard Klein, checking whether the boss had enjoyed the bit. Richard was not clapping. He leaned toward Evan's project director and said something I could not hear. The director shook his head. Richard looked at the program card, then at the escort card table near the ballroom doors, as if printed paper might correct what he had heard. His face had gone the color of old drywall dust. Claire handed the microphone back to Madeline. She looked pleased, relieved, bright with the success of a joke that had not cost her anything yet. Evan finally glanced at me. He gave me a small, apologetic shrug, not enough for Claire to feel, not enough for anyone to see, exactly enough to tell me he understood and had chosen comfort. I could have stood then. I could have said, "I paid for the room you're laughing in." I could have opened the folder and turned the wedding into an audit. Instead, I lifted my water glass. Fathers learn terrible tricks. One of them is how to make pain look like good manners. Madeline raised the microphone again for the next toast. Before she could call the maid of honor, Richard Klein pushed his chair back. It scraped softly, but the sound reached me through the applause. "Madeline," he said, voice controlled, "may I have that for a minute?" The room did not understand the request at first. Important men ask for microphones at weddings to make surprise toasts, to praise the groom, to mention golf outings and big futures. Evan understood enough to stand halfway. "Richard, we have a schedule," he said, smiling too hard. Richard did not look at him. "This won't take long." Madeline hesitated. Claire's smile flickered. In that small pause, I felt the whole reception change weight. The flowers were still there, the band was still waiting, the candles still burned in their glass cylinders, but the room had stopped belonging entirely to Claire. Richard took the microphone and turned not to the sweetheart table, but toward me. "Sir," he said, "are you Warren Hale?" My fingers tightened on the folder. I had not heard my full name spoken with that kind of care in years. "I am." He swallowed once. "Did you work special inspections and quality control on the Broad Street Municipal Annex project about 25 years ago?" At table 17, Nina's cousin whispered, "Warren?" Evan's face changed. Claire looked from Richard to me, then back again, angry already because she could feel a story forming without her permission. I answered the only way I knew how. I did. Richard held the microphone lower for a second, as if the next words had weight. Then he lifted it again and said to the room, "Then I need to say something because I knew one Hale in this business. He refused to sign off when everyone else wanted him to." No one laughed after that. Weddings have a sound when they are confused. Silverware lowered too carefully, chairs shifting half an inch, someone near the bar whispering, "What is this?" Richard Klein stood with the microphone in both hands, not like a man enjoying attention, but like a man who had opened the wrong door and found a room he remembered. Evan stepped down from the sweetheart table. "Richard, maybe we can do this later." "No," Richard said. "If I have the name right, later would be cowardly." The word hit Evan harder than if Richard had shouted. Claire's hand tightened around her champagne flute. I saw her mouth form my name without sound, as if I had caused this by existing in the chair assigned to me. Richard turned slightly toward the room. 25 years ago, my father's company was part of a municipal annex renovation downtown. There was a substitution proposed near the end. Fire-rated cable assemblies, fire-stopping documentation, inspection sign-offs. It sounded boring unless you were the person who had to put a name on it. Now the company table was still. Those men knew the language. They knew sign-offs were not decoration. "A lot of people wanted it closed," Richard said. "The schedule was bad. Money was bleeding. My father wanted the problem to go away. One quality control inspector refused to sign." He looked at me. That inspector was named Hale. I could feel Claire staring, not at me exactly, at the space between the father she had described and the man Richard was naming. "Mr. Hale wrote a non-conformance report that made half the project team furious," Richard said. He looked down for a second, then back at the room. He would not approve the substitution without proper documentation and corrective work. My father told that story for years, but not kindly at first. He said a stubborn inspector cost him weeks. Richard paused. A waiter near the kitchen door stopped with a tray in his hands. "Then there was a fire in a similar building in another county," Richard continued. "Different project, different people, same kind of shortcut." He paused until the room understood the distance between paperwork and smoke. After that, my father stopped saying stubborn. He said the Hale report probably saved him from signing off on something he would have had to live with for the rest of his life. My throat tightened in a way I disliked. I had not thought of that job as a legend. I thought of it as the year I lost the steady consulting stream that might have paid for better vacations, a newer car, the college fund without refinancing the house. After I refused, certain contractors stopped calling. People said I was difficult. They said I did not understand business. Nina understood. She had sat at the kitchen table with the bills spread out and said, "If your name is on it, it has to be true." Richard's voice lowered. That report became a training example in our company. Not because it was dramatic, because it was correct when correctness was expensive. The room had become so quiet I could hear the low hum of the speakers. Claire's cheeks were no longer bridal pink. Evan stood between the sweetheart table and Richard, smiling with the wrong muscles. "Richard," he said, "I respect that, but this is Claire's wedding." "I know what room I'm in," Richard said. That was when I stood. My knees did not like it, and for one embarrassing second the chair leg caught on the carpet. I put one hand on the table until my balance settled. "Mr. Klein," I said, "please don't turn my daughter's wedding into a hearing." He looked at me then with something close to apology. "You're right." I thought he would hand the microphone back. Part of me wanted him to. Part of me wanted the band to start, the room to drink too much coffee, and the whole thing to become a strange 3 minutes people argued about on the ride home. But Richard did not sit. "I won't make it a hearing," he said. "But I also won't let a room laugh at a man for the very thing my family benefited from." The words did not praise me. That mattered. Praise can be dismissed as sentiment. Richard was correcting the record in the language Evan's table understood. Benefit, risk, trust. name. I saw two project directors turn toward Evan, not with anger, with assessment. Richard faced the room again. Most people here don't know what a sign-off means. That's fair. It sounds like paperwork. But in construction, sometimes paperwork is the last honest place before people start pretending a problem is gone. He did not say OSHA. He did not say code section. He did not lecture. That was why the room listened. A man who refuses a bad sign-off can lose work, he said. He can lose friends. He can become the person people stop inviting into easy deals. He let that sit. But if he is right, every person who walks through that building later benefits from a decision they will never know about. My daughter's eyes filled then. I wanted to believe the tears were for the years she had misunderstood. I wanted that so badly that my hand opened on the table as if forgiveness were an object I could pick up. Then I saw Evan lean toward her and whisper, "Don't react, let him finish. Not I'm sorry, not I should have stopped you. Damage control. Even then." Richard lowered the microphone. Warren Hale was not a man who missed the beautiful thing because he was worried about a permit. He was a man who understood that beautiful things collapse when nobody worries in time. A sound moved through the room. Not applause, not yet. Shame, maybe. Recognition. People looking back at my table with new eyes and not knowing what to do with the old laugh still warm in their mouths. Richard brought the microphone back to Madeline. "That's all," he said. It was not all. Not for Claire, not for Evan, not for me. But the room tried to obey the shape of a wedding. Someone clapped once. Then 3 more people clapped because silence had become unbearable. I did not want the applause. It struck me as another thing arriving too late and too publicly. I sat down before it grew. Claire left the sweetheart table and came toward me, her dress gathered in one hand, tears bright on her cheeks. For one foolish second, I thought she was coming to put her arms around me. She bent close enough that her veil brushed my shoulder. "Dad," she whispered, "please tell him it was fine." I looked at her. "Tell Richard he misunderstood," she said. "Tell him you weren't hurt. Evan says this could make things weird at work." There are moments when a man's heart does not break loudly. It simply changes its record of the facts. "Claire," I said, keeping my voice low, "what part do you think he misunderstood?" Her eyes flashed toward the guests, toward Evan, toward the company table where Richard had taken his seat and was no longer smiling. "Not now," she whispered. "Please." "Don't make tonight worse." The band started a soft instrumental song because Madeline had signaled them to rescue the room. My daughter stood beside me crying, and the first thing she asked me to protect was not my dignity, not the truth, not even her own shame. It was Evan's clean path back to his boss. The band did what it was paid to do. It filled the broken place with music. Couples drifted toward the dance floor because movement gave them permission not to choose a side. Waiters cleared plates with professional mercy. Madeline stood near the cake table, speaking into her headset with the calm panic of a woman trying to keep a wedding from becoming a family meeting. Claire stayed by my chair only long enough to see I would not give her the sentence she wanted. "Dad, please," she whispered. "Just tell him you know I was joking." When I answered, "I know you called it a joke," she flinched because I had answered the wording, not the demand. Evan came up behind her then, hand at her waist, face arranged for guests who might be watching. "Warren," he said quietly, "nobody wants drama." That was the first time all night he had used my name with purpose. Not Dad, not Mr. Hale, not even Sir. Warren. A man across a negotiation. "Then don't ask me to lie," I said. His smile thinned. He called it calming down a misunderstanding. Claire wiped under one eye and pressed the version they needed. "You were smiling," she said. "Everyone saw you smiling. If you were hurt, why did you just sit there?" The question was not innocent. It built a bridge to the version she needed. I had smiled because I knew Richard would rescue me. I had sat still because I had planned the turn. My restraint, the only thing I had left, was becoming evidence against me. "I sat there," I said, "because you were my daughter in a wedding dress." Claire looked away first. Evan did not. He said Richard respected me. If I told him Claire got carried away, the night would stop being awkward. For whom? I asked. His jaw moved. His eyes went to table 2, where Richard had joined the project directors. For everyone, he said. Claire, me, your family, my family. Your recommendation, I said. That landed. Evan's hand dropped from Claire's waist. This is not the place. I told him it became the place when he let her make my life into the entertainment. Claire's tears sharpened into anger. She said she had only told stories I used to tell at home. Stories about the Corolla, the garage, contractors calling during dinner. When I said, I laughed at home, she answered, so now I'm supposed to know which version of you is real. The cruelty of that was quieter than the toast, and worse because there was no audience to blame. She was not confused by my pain. She was irritated by the inconvenience of it. Madeline approached with a fixed smile. Claire, we're ready for the parent dance whenever you are. Claire stared at me as if I had hidden another trap in the schedule. The father-daughter dance had already been shortened to 90 seconds because, she told me, long dances felt old-fashioned. We should do it, Evan said. People are watching. That was how I learned the dance had become a repair tool. Claire held out her hand. I took it because refusing would give them the easier story. The band began a slow version of a song Nina used to play while cooking Sunday breakfast. I do not know whether Claire chose it or the planner did. Under the lights, my daughter's face looked younger and harder at the same time. She moved carefully so the dress would not drag. Say something to Richard after this, she whispered without moving her lips much. Please. I will not tell him your words meant something else. Then tell him family jokes get messy. They do when they are not jokes. Her fingers tightened in mine. From the edge of the dance floor, phones lifted. Guests were recording now because they sensed a story inside the official story. I saw one of Evan's cousins angle her phone so Claire's wet eyes would catch the light. Another guest turned toward Richard's table, hoping for a second confrontation. I gave them none. I counted the steps. 4, turn, 4, turn. Construction taught me that panic becomes manageable when you measure something. When the song ended, Claire hugged me for the cameras. Her cheek touched mine. You can still fix it, she breathed. I let go before the photographer could turn that into tenderness. The first clip reached me before the cake cutting. Nina's cousin leaned across table 17 and showed me her phone. It was a 12-second video from the dance floor, sent in a family group chat I had not known existed. The caption said, "Is Claire okay?" Her dad looked like he knew that boss speech was coming. The clip did not show Claire's toast. It did not show the line about my life, or Evan smiling, or Richard asking my name. It showed Claire crying beside my chair and me sitting very still. Then it cut to Richard speaking with the microphone, my face turned toward him. Who sent that? I asked. I don't know. It came from one of Evan's cousins. Across the room, Evan was typing with both thumbs. Claire stood beside him, no longer crying, watching his screen. When she looked up and saw me looking, she did not come over. She turned her phone face down against her bouquet. That told me more than the video. I walked to the hallway outside the ballroom, not because I wanted to leave, but because I needed one place where people were not filming my expression. Near the restrooms, 2 younger guests stopped talking when they saw me. One of them said too brightly, "Beautiful wedding, sir." It was paid for beautifully, I said before I could stop myself. The words were small. They still cost me. I had not meant to let bitterness speak in public. Now even I had contributed a sentence someone could repeat without context. Richard came into the hallway a minute later and stopped far enough away to give me the choice. He said he owed me an apology for the timing. I told him he had told the truth. Truth can still land badly, he said, and I almost laughed because that was the most construction thing anyone had said all night. He smiled once, but it did not stay. Evan had already asked him to disregard what happened. Claire was emotional. My relationship with her was complicated. Family awkwardness should not affect work. When I asked what Richard had said, he answered, "Family awkwardness is not my business. Judgment is." That word followed me back into the ballroom. Judgment. Not punishment, not revenge. A quieter thing, and therefore harder for Evan to fight. Near the dessert table, Claire was speaking to two bridesmaids with the urgent stillness of someone assigning roles. One bridesmaid nodded and walked away with her phone already open. Evan saw Richard and me enter together. His face closed. At 11:18, while the cake knife was still in Claire's hand, a project engineer from Evan's company forwarded the edited clip into their internal chat, with a message meant as a joke. Mercer family wedding got intense. Boss gave a safety sermon to the bride's dad. By midnight, the joke had reached people who were not at the wedding. By morning, it would not look like Claire had mocked me. It would look like I had sat there smiling while a powerful man made my daughter cry. By 7 the next morning, the wedding had become a story other people could hold in one hand. My phone sat on the kitchen table, buzzing against the wood while I made coffee I did not want. The first messages were from relatives who had been there. "Are you all right? What happened after we left? Did Claire know that man was going to speak?" Then came the ones from people who had not heard Claire's toast. "Warren, why would you let a stranger embarrass your daughter like that? Saw the clip. That was rough. Hope you and Claire work it out." One nephew wrote, "I get that she hurt your feelings, but weddings are emotional. Maybe don't let a boss pile on." I watched the clip again, though I should not have. It began after Claire was already crying. It showed me sitting still, Richard standing with the microphone, Evan's face tight, guests frozen in that expensive room. It did not include coupon lasagna, fire ratings, my daughter saying she wanted a life with more imagination. It did not show Evan smiling while she cut me down. The worst part was my own face. I looked calm, almost satisfied. I knew what the calm had cost, but a phone camera does not record cost. It records shape. Under the video, someone from Evan's company had added a laughing emoji and then deleted it. The deletion stayed visible as its own kind of evidence. At 7:43, Richard Klein called. "Mr. Hale," he said, "I need to ask you an uncomfortable question." "Then ask it directly." He took one breath. "Did you know who I was before last night?" There it was. The clip had done its work fast. "I knew your name from Evan's company newsletter. I did not know you knew mine." "Did you tell Claire that?" "No." "Did you ask anyone to seat me where I could hear her speech?" I looked at the blue folder on the table. It contained receipts, not strategy. "Mr. Klein, I was seated by the restrooms. If I planned an ambush, I planned it badly." He was quiet for a second, and I heard traffic behind him. "Evan is saying the night was emotionally complicated. He says you and Claire have money tension over a townhouse, and that I walked into a family issue I did not understand." The words were careful. I respected careful words. They show the speaker knows where the floor is weak. "There is money tension now," I said. "There wasn't before the toast." "Before? I paid for the wedding. I promised a down payment after it. I had not wired it." Richard exhaled. "Not surprise, exactly. A recalculation. Do you have records?" "Yes. I am not asking to see them yet," he said. "But I need to know whether I became part of something staged." "You became part of something my daughter did not expect to have a cost." Richard did not answer right away. When he did, his voice had moved from apology to work. "Evan is under consideration for a lead coordination role on the Garrison School renovation. It's not a promotion on paper, but it is a trust assignment. Lots of public scrutiny, tight safety requirements, difficult subcontractors. I know the kind. He told me this morning he cannot lead effectively if his future father-in-law is willing to use a company executive inside a family dispute." Future father-in-law. Even after the vows, Evan had chosen the phrase that made me sound like an outside problem not yet fully attached. "What did you tell him?" I asked. "I told him I was pausing my recommendation until I understood the sequence." There it was. The first consequence with a letterhead behind it. Not fired, not ruined, paused. In construction, paused can be enough to make every ambitious man hear a door closing. I opened the blue folder while Richard waited on the line. The venue receipt lay on top. Beneath it, the planner contract, the photographer invoice, the shuttle balance, and the printout of Claire's seating chart. Farther back, in a different sleeve, was a scanned copy of the old non-conformance report I had kept for reasons I used to call professional habit, and Nina used to call conscience. "I can show chronology," I said. "Not gossip, chronology." "That may be all I need," Richard said. When the call ended, my coffee was cold. The phone buzzed again before I could stand. Claire had sent no apology. She had sent a screenshot of the townhouse closing timeline. Under it, she wrote, "We need to talk before this gets worse." I stared at the phrase. This. Not what I said, not what you heard, not what I did to you in that room. This. As if the damage had arrived from weather. I did not answer. Instead, I drove to the venue. Diane Morris, the accounts manager, had promised the week before that I could pick up a corrected final invoice after the wedding because the bar count had changed. She looked tired when she came out of the office, the professional tired of someone who had seen 3 families cry over flowers before lunch. "Mr. Hale," she said, "I hope everything went all right." That was the kindest lie available. "I need the final paid statement," I said. "Itemized if you have it." She hesitated only long enough to understand that this was not about tax records. "Of course." While the printer worked, I heard 2 staff members in the hallway talking about the clip. One said, "Was he the dad? The one whose boss friend toasted him?" The other said, "I heard the bride's speech was bad, but the video doesn't show it." There it was in the wild. I heard, but the video doesn't show it. Truth had become rumor. The edited version had pictures. Diane handed me the statement in a sealed envelope. "For what it's worth," she said softly. "I was near the service door during the bride's toast. I heard enough. I thanked her, but I did not ask for a statement." Not yet. I was still trying not to turn my daughter's wedding into a case file. Back home, I laid 3 piles on the kitchen table. Wedding payments, old construction report, down payment paperwork. The order mattered because motive mattered. If I showed only the old report, I looked like a man waiting decades for applause. If I showed only the receipts, I looked like a father charging his daughter after a bad joke. Together, they said something narrower. I had paid quietly, been mocked publicly, and been defended by a man I had not invited into the wound. I took a picture of nothing. That was a decision. My phone hovered over the documents and I put it down. I would show paper to people who had a reason to see it. I would not feed a group chat until my daughter became a villain for strangers. Claire had done wrong. She was still my child. At 10:16, Evan texted, "Richard is freezing my recommendation. We need to handle this like adults." Adults. Another word people use when they want you to absorb the cost quietly. Before I could answer, a car door closed outside. Through the kitchen window, I saw Claire coming up the walk in yesterday's rehearsal dinner coat, hair pulled back, sunglasses hiding swollen eyes. In her hand was a manila folder. I knew what it was before she knocked. The townhouse wire instructions. The $120,000 I had promised to send after the wedding, when I still believed gratitude could be late and still arrive. She knocked once, then opened the door like she had when she was 16. "Dad," she said, voice already trembling, "we have to fix the transfer before everything falls apart." Claire stood in my kitchen with the manila folder against her chest as if it were a shield. For a second, the house forgot she was 31. Then she put the folder on the table, and the girl who used to drop her backpack by the fridge disappeared. "The closing coordinator needs confirmation by Tuesday," she said. "If the wire is late, we could lose the rate lock." No hello, no apology. The first solid thing between us that morning was a banking deadline. I pulled out the chair across from me and told her to sit. She said Evan was waiting in the car. Of course he was. Close enough to pressure, far enough not to face the kitchen where I had packed Claire's lunches and paid her tuition after she changed majors. I told her again to sit. She sat. Her sunglasses remained on for 3 seconds. Then she took them off because she needed me to see the damage. Her eyes were swollen. I did not doubt the tears. I doubted their direction. "Dad," she said, softer now, "yesterday got out of control." I told her yesterday had been controlled until she took the microphone. She opened the folder and slid the wire instructions toward me. We can talk about the toast, but if this falls through, it hurts both of us. Both of us? I asked. You promised, Dad. I looked at the routing number, the title company name, the exact amount, $120,000. I had imagined sending it with a note about Nina, about roots, about a home that would be theirs because family still helped family. That note now seemed written by a man I used to be. I asked, "What did you mock last night?" Claire blinked and told me not to do this like an inspection. I asked again. She tried cautious, then the garage, the Corolla, the way I worried about everything. I said no each time. Her fingers curled around the edge of the folder. What do you want me to say? I told her I wanted the truth before the money. That made her look toward the front window, toward Evan's car. She was measuring how much honesty the down payment required. I had spent years teaching her to read contracts, and here she was reading me. I made you sound small, she said finally. The words entered the kitchen and changed the air. They were not enough, but they were the first words that faced the right direction. Why? She laughed once without humor. Because Evan's world is different. Because his people talk about projects and equity and travel and schools, like everybody grew up with options. Because when you start telling stories about bad wiring and used cars, I feel 12 years old again. You felt 12, I said, so you made me look ridiculous in front of 200 adults. Her face tightened. She said she had not known Richard was going to say all that. I told her neither had I. But you let him, she said. There it was again, the new foundation. If I did not cause the humiliation, I had allowed the correction. If I had allowed the correction, then canceling the wire would look like the final step of a plan. I reminded her that I had asked him not to turn the wedding into a hearing. She answered that I had done it after he had already started. Then she rushed ahead. If I pulled the money now, everyone would say I wanted revenge. Evan's family would say I paid for the wedding to control her. Richard would think Evan had married into a mess. You can still show everyone this is family, she said, not punishment. I almost admired the structure. She had built a moral trap out of my own fear. If I sent the money, I proved I was generous. If I paused it, I proved I had been waiting to punish her. I asked what the money would prove about last night. She said it would prove I was bigger than one bad toast. When I asked what her apology would prove, she looked down at the wire instructions and said, "I'm here, aren't I? You brought a routing number." Her eyes filled again, but this time I did not move toward the tissue box. Tears had become part of the negotiation. My phone buzzed on the table. Evan's name lit the screen. Claire reached for it by instinct, then stopped when she remembered it was mine. She told me to answer him. I said no. She said he thought I was ignoring him to scare them. I told her he could think in the car. The phone stopped, then started again. This time, Evan left a voicemail, and his voice came through the speaker before I could silence it because my thumb hit the wrong button. "Warren, this is getting out of hand. Richard is asking questions he has no right to ask. If you care about Claire, call me before you make a financial decision that hurts her future. We can still keep this private." The room held still after the message ended. "Private," I said. Claire's face flushed. She insisted he meant not making it worse. I told her he meant the money and the recommendation. "Those are our life, Dad," she said. "No," I said. "Those are benefits. Your life is what you do when benefits are at risk." She stood so quickly the chair legs scraped and accused me of turning everything into a moral test. I told her, "Last night you turned my life into a joke. This morning you turned my money into proof that I still love you. I am allowed to slow down." That sentence frightened her more than anger would have. She looked at the folder, my phone, and the blue wedding receipts. When she asked what slow down meant, I told her it meant I was not wiring $120,000 today. Claire sat back down as if her knees had been cut. The earnest money was already in. They had planned around this. I told her I knew. She said I had promised after the wedding. I answered that I had promised before she made me ashamed to be visible at it. That was the first sentence that made her cry without checking the window. She covered her mouth and breathed through her fingers. I wanted to take it back because fathers are trained by years of fevers, scraped knees, and school parking lots to remove pain from their children as fast as possible. I did not take it back. I told her to come tomorrow without Evan, without the closing timeline, without Richard's recommendation, and tell me what she thought she had done. When she asked whether I would send the money then, I said no. Then I would know whether I still had a daughter who could sit at the table without an invoice. The words landed between us harder than I expected. Claire gathered the wire instructions, but one page slid out and stayed on the floor. Neither of us reached for it. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Evan. If you don't meet Richard today, the recommendation is gone. Claire needs you to fix what you started. Claire saw the preview before I turned the screen over. For a second, her shame and his fear fought across her face. His fear won. "Dad," she said, "just meet him, please. If Richard hears your side from you, maybe he won't punish Evan." I picked up the fallen wire page and placed it back in the folder. That is exactly why I need to meet him without you two in the room. I did not meet Richard at his office. That would have made the story too easy for Evan, the wounded father walking into the boss's building with a folder under his arm. I asked for a neutral place, and Richard suggested a small conference room at the hotel, because Diane could confirm the payment record there without being dragged into company politics. "I don't want Claire there," I told him on the phone. "I did not invite her." "I don't want Evan there either." Richard paused. He asked to attend. Of course he did. I told him no. That answer told me more than reassurance would have. Boundaries are clearest when they inconvenience the person asking for exceptions. I arrived with one folder, not a box, not a stack meant to bury anyone. Wedding paid statement, seating chart screenshot, the old non-conformance report, a printed email from 25 years ago where I refused to approve the substituted assemblies without documentation. I left out Claire's childhood, Nina's hospital promise, the texts that hurt me, the wire instructions. Those belonged to family pain. Richard needed chronology. Diane was already in the room when I entered. She looked uncomfortable but steady. "I can confirm payments," she said before anyone asked. "Nothing else." "That's all I want," I said. Richard closed the door, placed his phone face down on the table, and nodded once. "Then let's keep this narrow." Diane opened her own file first. She had the calm of a person who trusted numbers, because numbers did not ask her to pick a family. "The venue contract was signed by Claire Hale and Evan Mercer," she said. "Deposit came from their joint account. Final balance and most add-ons were paid by Warren Hale." She slid copies across the table. Not originals, not drama. Copies. "Amount?" Richard asked. $68,340 on the final statement, Diane said. "Additional vendor payments were outside our system. I can't verify those." "Did Mr. Hale ask for special access, seating changes, microphone time? Anything like that?" "No." "Did he ask who would be speaking?" "No." Diane looked at me then, and I saw pity try to enter her professionalism. She stopped it. "He asked for a corrected paid statement. That's all." Richard wrote 3 notes on a yellow pad. He did not look pleased. He looked less able to believe Evan's version. I handed him the seating chart screenshot next. "This is not a complaint. I am showing why I did not place myself near your table or Claire's microphone. I did not manage the room." Richard looked at table 17, then at table 2. His mouth tightened. "Understood." For the first time since the wedding, I felt the ground under the facts hold. The old report was harder to open. Paper from a past life has a smell even after it has been scanned and printed again. I placed the first page in front of Richard and kept my hand on the rest. "This is the document you referenced," I said, "not the whole file. The relevant page and the email where I refused the substituted assemblies." Richard read silently. Diane looked away, because venue accounts did not need to witness a man's old career wound. I respected her for that. The email was short. I had been younger then and more direct than polite. "I cannot sign off on this installation without approved documentation and corrective verification." Schedule pressure does not change the requirement. My name will not be attached to this condition. Richard touched the line with one finger. This was in our training deck. I never saw the original email. Your father called me a problem for 6 months. He called you worse at home, Richard said, and then his face changed. I'm sorry. He told that part later, too. He was under pressure. So were you. I did not answer. Some truths are less useful when they become sympathy. Richard looked from the report to the wedding statement. This is enough for chronology. You funded the reception. You did not invite my speech. You had a professional history I recognized independently. And Claire still said what she said. Yes, he said. But that part is family. Exactly. That was why I had not brought the wire instructions. Not yet. I wanted one room where the facts did not become leverage for either side. Richard's phone lit up face down. He ignored it. It lit again. The third time, he turned it over and looked at the screen without picking it up. Evan? I asked. Yes. You can answer if you need to. Richard read the message and placed the phone where I could not see the words. He says, documents after the fact prove preparation. I almost smiled. Preparation for what? Being laughed at? Diane closed her folder. I should go. Thank you, Richard said. You may get a call from Evan. Then I will tell him the same thing. I confirm payments. I don't interpret families. When she left, the room felt smaller and more dangerous. There was no neutral third person now, only a father and the man who could change Evan's week with one decision. I don't want him fired, I said. That is not on the table. I don't want you punishing him for Claire. I'm not. He leaned back, tired suddenly. Warren, a sensitive project requires someone who understands when public behavior reveals private judgment. Last night, Evan watched his wife humiliate the man who funded the room. He smiled. Afterward, he asked me to protect his recommendation before he asked whether the account was true. This morning, he tried to make your documents look like manipulation before I had seen them. He's ambitious. Ambition is not the problem. Character under pressure is. I looked at the old report. 25 years ago, that sentence would have cost me work. Now it was costing Evan a door. Richard wrote one more note, then closed his pad. I'm removing my recommendation for the Garrison lead role. He will stay on his current assignment. He will have an ethics conversation with operations. If he earns trust again, that's his work to do. The decision sounded smaller than revenge and larger than a warning. It was the kind ambitious men hate because there is nothing dramatic enough to appeal. Do you need me to sign anything? I asked. No. Do you need the full wedding video? No. I don't run marriages. That sentence was the line I needed. Richard had not become my weapon. He had taken back his own recommendation. In the parking lot, I checked my phone. 4 missed calls from Claire, 2 from Evan. A text from an unknown number said, "Hope you're proud of using a wedding to wreck a career." I deleted it. Then Evan's name appeared again, and this time I answered. "You cost me Garrison," he said before I could speak. "No," I said. "Richard made a work decision. Because of you. Because of what he saw and what you did after." His breathing changed. "Claire is beside herself. You need to tell her this can be fixed." "Can it?" "Call Richard. Say you overreacted. Say the money situation is private. Say I didn't know the toast would go there." I looked back at the hotel doors where the meeting had stayed narrow by choice. "Evan, you still think the problem is what I can say for you?" "The problem," he snapped, "is that Claire's father just made her marriage start with a punishment." He hung up. A minute later, Claire texted, "What did you do?" Claire called while I was still in the hotel parking lot. I let it ring until the 4th time because I needed my voice to be mine when I used it. "What did you do?" she asked again, no greeting, no breath. I said I had shown Richard the sequence. She said Evan lost Garrison. I corrected her. Evan lost a recommendation. "Don't wordsmith me, Dad. That project was his next step." Claire knew the name of Evan's opportunity before she could name the sentence from her toast that had cut me deepest. I said Richard had made a work decision. Claire said it happened because I went there with documents. I told her it happened because Evan smiled at the wrong thing and then lied about the shape of it. She went silent. In that silence, I heard Evan near her, not speaking but present. I could feel him feeding the room with his version. She said Evan had not lied, only said it looked planned. I told her looking was not the same as being. She demanded that I call Richard and say Evan did not know she was going to say all that. I asked, "Did he know while you were saying it?" She made a small sound, almost a sob, almost anger. "Claire," I said, "a consequence is not the same thing as a punishment. A punishment is something I do to hurt you. A consequence is what happens when other people believe what they saw." She whispered something away from the phone, and I knew Evan was still close enough to hear every word. "He says you can still fix it," Claire said. "He can call Richard himself," I said. She said he had, and Richard would not discuss it beyond HR now. I told her Richard had decided where the work line was. "Dad, stop talking like a manual. This is my husband." I answered, "And I am your father." The line went quiet. Father, not wallet, not obstacle, not old joke with receipts. She said if I loved her, I would not let her marriage start like this. I told her the marriage had started when Evan smiled through the toast. She called that unfair. I said it was accurate. She began crying again. This time I heard less performance in it and more fear. But fear still aimed at Evan's loss. He had worked for that project. Richard respected me. One call from me could change the tone. When I asked what I would say, she listed the false script. Evan did not mean anything by smiling. I was not hurt until Richard made it bigger. I did not want this affecting work. I told her all three would be false. She called them generous. I looked at the folder beside me. Generosity is not signing off on a bad condition because people are tired of seeing it. She hated that. I heard it in her breath. "You're comparing my husband to unsafe construction?" "No," I said. "I am remembering who I become when I put my name on what I know is not true." After the call, I drove to my credit union. Not because the wire had been scheduled automatically. I had not given anyone that much trust. But the money sat in an account I had named Claire Home, and names have power over weak moments. The branch manager, Ms. Patel, had handled Nina's estate paperwork years earlier. "What can we do for you today, Mr. Hale?" "I need to remove a nickname from an account and place a note that no outgoing wire over 10,000 goes without in-person confirmation." She did not ask family questions. Good bankers know grief has many shapes. She printed the form and turned the screen so I could see the account. Claire Home sat there in harmless blue letters above the balance. "What would you like the nickname changed to?" I had not expected the question to hurt. "Leave it blank for now," I said. When she deleted the words, nothing moved in the account. But an expectation that had lived in my head for months lost its label. Ms. Patel asked whether I wanted wire instructions saved on file. I said no, and watched her remove the title company draft from the pending notes. It was a small administrative act. It felt like closing a door without slamming it. In the parking lot, I called Teresa Bell at the Community College Foundation. Nina had once volunteered there in the adult literacy office. I asked Teresa what it would take to endow a scholarship for students in building inspection, construction management, or safety compliance. Teresa did not gush. I appreciated that. She asked whether this was a memorial gift, a tax planning question, or a restricted scholarship. I told her it was probably all three, but mostly it was a way to put money where it would not require my daughter to be ashamed of me. She was quiet for a respectful second, then said they could start with a pledge agreement, and that I did not need to move the full amount at once. When I said I might want to, she set an in-person meeting. We set a meeting for the next morning. When I hung up, I sat in the car with my hands empty in my lap and felt the first clean inch of air since Claire took the microphone. The money had not become revenge yet. That mattered. It had become unavailable to the people who thought humiliation could still earn interest. Claire called again at 4:05. I answered because not answering would let Evan narrate the silence. She said the title company did not have confirmation. I told her they would not. When she said my name in that warning child voice, I told her I had changed the account instructions. For a moment, I heard only traffic on her end. Then she said very quietly, "You already decided." "I decided not to wire money while you and Evan are treating it like damage control." She said they needed that house. I told her they needed a house they could afford without making me disappear inside it. The line trembled. "Are you giving it to strangers?" There it was, the accusation that would carry into part of our family if she needed it to. Strangers over daughter, scholarship over blood, public goodness over private cruelty. I told her no. I was giving it to students who would one day be asked to sign something easy and wrong. I was giving it to her mother's name because Nina understood what that costs. Claire said Mom would want me to help her. That one nearly did it. Not because it was fair, because Nina's name still opened every locked room in me. I said her mother would ask what help was turning her into. Claire made a sound like I had slapped her and told me not to use Nina against her. I told her not to use Nina to reopen a wire. The line went quiet. I could hear her crying for real now, or closer to real than before. I did not enjoy it. That is important. Consequence is not clean when it lands on someone you once carried through a fever at 3 in the morning. I told her to come tomorrow if she wanted to talk as my daughter. When she asked what happened if she asked about the money, I said, "Then I will know you came as a buyer." She hung up. I sat in the car until the summer heat pushed through the windshield. Then I opened the banking app one more time. The account had no nickname now. The pending wire note was gone. The money was still mine, which meant the decision was still mine, which meant love no longer got to hide inside automatic payment. That night I wrote one line on a legal pad. Nina Hale Building Safety Scholarship. Under it I wrote, "For students who know a signature is a promise." For the first time since the wedding, the name Hale looked like something that could move forward without asking Claire's permission. Claire came the next afternoon, without Evan's car behind her. From the kitchen window, I saw her stand on the porch for almost a full minute before she knocked. As a teenager, she had slammed that door so often the frame still carried a scar. Now she waited to be allowed in. I opened the door and stepped back. When I asked whether she was alone and whether Evan was listening from the driveway, she answered yes, then no, and held up her powered-off phone. The gesture was small. It still mattered. At the kitchen table, she did not put a folder between us. She put her hands there, empty except for the new wedding ring. Her eyes moved once toward the blue folder, then back to me. She said she did not know how to do this. I told her to start without asking for anything. That hurt her. I saw it. Good. Some pain is information. She swallowed. I made you small because I wanted them to think I had outgrown where I came from. The sentence did not heal anything. It did something better. It stood on its own feet without leaning on the wire. I asked who them meant. She looked at the table instead of the folder this time and named Evan's parents, Richard, the directors, the cousins who talked about ski houses like everybody had one. Maybe Evan too. Maybe herself most of all. That answer cost her. I let the cost sit there. When Mom was alive, Claire said, she made our house feel normal. She looked toward the sink, not at me. After she died, I started seeing everything through other people's eyes. The garage, your old jacket, the way you checked receipts at restaurants. Her voice dropped. I hated that I noticed it. Then I hated you for making me notice. I did not rescue her from the ugliness of that. If she had come for comfort, she had come too early. When I asked about the wedding, she said she wanted Evan's people to laugh with her before they could laugh at her. So you gave them me, I said. She closed her eyes and answered yes. The word was small and complete. It did not ask me to admire her honesty. It did not add but. It simply stood there, guilty. I got up and poured coffee because my hands needed work. I put a mug in front of her the way I had when she was in college. She touched it but did not drink. She said she was sorry. When I asked for what, she did not flinch. For making people laugh at the life that paid for hers. For letting Evan smile. For coming with wire instructions before she came with this. That was the first apology I believed enough to hurt. Then she looked at the blue folder. She did not reach for it. She did not say the word money, but the look was there, quick and ashamed. And because I was her father, I knew every version of her asking before she asked. I told her to say it. Her shoulders fell. If the scholarship was not final yet, was there any way to split the money? Not all of it. Just enough so they did not lose the townhouse. There are traps people set on purpose, and there are traps built by hunger. This one was both. She had apologized. She had named the shame. Now she wanted the apology to become a key. I told her she could come here as my daughter, but not as a bride with a bill. She looked down at her ring and said the apology changed nothing. I told her it changed whether the door was open. But not the money, she said. Not the money, I answered. She pressed her hands flat against the table and said Evan would say she had come here for nothing. I asked, "Did you?" The question hit harder than I meant it to. She stared at me, and for a few seconds I saw the old Claire, the child who hated being caught between wanting something and knowing the wanting made her ugly. When she whispered that she did not know yet, I told her that was the work. She wiped her face with her sleeve, a gesture too young for the polished woman from the wedding. Evan says you're choosing a point over my future. Evan's future lost one recommendation. Your future is not one townhouse. She sat with that long enough for the refrigerator to click on and off. The house had not heard us this quiet since Nina died. Claire asked what I wanted from her. I told her, no jokes about the life that fed her, no requests brought through Evan, no asking me to repair a version of events that protected his comfort. And if she came here, she came before she needed something. That one made her look up. She said she did not know if she knew how. I told her to learn. It was not tender. It was not cruel. It was the only honest instruction I had left. I took a plain envelope from the counter and slid it toward her. Inside was a copy of the first scholarship questionnaire Teresa had emailed me. Name of fund, purpose, donor statement, preferred field of study. I had printed it because I wanted Claire to see where the money was going before family rumor shaped it. She opened it and read, Nina Hale Building Safety Scholarship, in my handwriting. Her mouth folded when she saw I had used her mother's name. I told her I was using our name. She said it was for strangers. I said it was for people for strangers. I said it was for people who would stand where I stood and be told to sign anyway. She read the second line. For students who know a signature is a promise. Her thumb stopped on the word promise. She said she had broken one. I said yes. When she said I had broken one to her, I told her no. I had changed help that had become payment for silence. Claire stayed another 20 minutes. We did not fix each other. We did not even finish the coffee. She told me Evan was angry enough to call the townhouse a lost cause, and then ask whether my credit union had a board he could appeal to, which almost made her laugh from shame. I told her Richard had not ruined Evan. Richard had simply stopped lending him trust he had not earned. She said she did not know what happened when she went home. I told her not to decide it for Evan in advance. She said I made that sound easy. I said no, I made it sound hers. She stood at the door with the envelope in her hand. For the first time since the wedding, she did not try to hug me for a camera, for a witness, or for a transaction. She only asked if she could come next week. I told her yes if she came before she needed something. She nodded and said she would try. I told her try was not a schedule. That almost brought the old, annoyed Claire back, and I was glad to see a living piece of her. Tuesday, she said. After work. No Evan. I said Tuesday. When she left, I sat back down at the kitchen table and filled out the first page of Teresa's scholarship questionnaire. Donor name, Warren Hale. Fund name, Nina Hale Building Safety Scholarship. Purpose, support students entering construction inspection, building safety, or quality control work. The donor statement took longer. I crossed out 2 versions. The final one was plain enough. This scholarship honors people who do careful work before anyone applauds it. I signed the bottom of the page. My hand shook once, then settled. The signature did not bring my daughter back to me. It did not erase the wedding or soften the closed wire. but it gave the money a place to stand that was not built out of humiliation. On the counter, Claire had left the title company page behind. I did not throw it away. I folded it and placed it in the blue folder behind the paid wedding statement where it belonged. Not as a threat, not as a weapon, but as proof of the day I stopped confusing a promise with a blank check. Teresa Bell's office at the community college looked nothing like the hotel. No lilies, no gold script, no people pretending a room could make them better than they were. There were 2 filing cabinets, a coffee maker that clicked too loudly, and a bulletin board covered with pictures of students in hard hats, nursing scrubs, welding gloves, and cheap graduation gowns. "You understand the pledge can be structured," Teresa said. "You do not need to fund the whole amount today." "I understand. And once the agreement is signed, any change has to go through the foundation board." "Good." She looked up from the papers then. Some donors hesitate at that sentence. I am counting on that sentence. I signed the pledge in 3 places. The amount did not look smaller because it was going to strangers. It looked cleaner because it was no longer waiting to be earned by someone else's shame. Teresa attached the donor statement, then asked whether I wanted the scholarship to mention Nina's volunteer work or my construction background. "Both," I said. "But keep it plain." She helped adults read forms they were embarrassed to admit they could not read. I refused to sign forms people wanted me to pretend were fine. That is enough family history. Teresa wrote a note. That's more than enough. When I left, I carried copies in a folder that was not blue. Richard's email arrived while I was in the parking lot. Subject line, Hail Report Scan. For a moment, I did not open it. I sat with Teresa's envelope on the passenger seat and looked at the sender's name. There are days when the past becomes useful, and you resent it for waiting so long. The attachment was a scan from his company's archived training deck. My old non-conformance report appeared on slide 4, with names redacted except for mine. Under it, someone had written, "Schedule pressure does not remove duty of care." Richard's message was short. "Warren, I thought you should have the version my father kept. For clarity, Evan's garrison recommendation remains withdrawn. This is not a family penalty. It is a trust decision. He will have a path back, but not through you." I read the last sentence twice. Not through you. That was the sentence I had needed from Evan's world. Not praise, not outrage. A wall. I forwarded nothing to Claire. I printed the scan at home and placed it behind the scholarship pledge, not in the wedding folder. It belonged with the future now. Then I wrote Richard a reply. "Thank you. Please keep my daughter out of any work conversation unless she brings herself into it." He answered 10 minutes later. "Agreed. One word can be a mercy when it closes a door people keep trying to use." Tuesday came with rain. Claire texted at 4:12. "Still okay for 6? No Evan, no paperwork." I looked at the words longer than necessary. They were almost ordinary. That made them dangerous in a different way. Ordinary can make a lonely father forget the cost too soon. I wrote back, 6 is fine. She arrived with grocery store flowers, not the expensive kind. I almost told her not to bring gifts, then saw the small tag still attached to the plastic sleeve. Manager's special, $6. Claire saw me see it. "I didn't want them to look like an apology purchase," she said. "They look like flowers." She put them in a glass because we had never owned a proper vase after Nina broke the good one and blamed the cat we did not have. Claire smiled at the memory before either of us said it. Then the smile faded, and she sat at the table without taking out her phone. We talked for 40 minutes, not well, not smoothly. She asked about Teresa. I told her the scholarship was signed. Her face changed, but she did not ask whether it was reversible. That counted. Near the end, she said, "Evan thinks I should be angrier." "Are you?" "Some days." "Then be honest about which part." She nodded. "I'm angry the money is gone. I'm more angry that I made you right to take it away." That was not forgiveness. It was not even peace. It was a truthful sentence without a price tag, and for that Tuesday, it was enough. The wedding clip faded the way most clips fade. New things arrived for people to misunderstand. By the second week, the Mercer wedding was no longer useful to strangers. But consequences do not need an audience to remain alive. Evan kept his job and lost the shortcut. Richard did not discuss him with me again. Claire told me later that the ethics conversation had been humiliating because nobody yelled. They simply asked Evan to describe what he had seen, what he had done, and why his first response afterward was to manage the boss instead of the harm. He came home angry, she said, then quiet. Did he blame me? I asked. Yes. Did you? She looked at the mug in her hands. Some days. Less than before. That was the shape of our contact now. Narrow, awkward, sometimes honest. She came 2 Tuesdays in a row, missed the third, then called before the fourth to say she was not ready to sit at the table without arguing about the house. I said that was useful. The townhouse fell through. Claire did not tell me right away. Evan's mother did. She left a voicemail that began with courtesy and ended with a sentence about fathers who enjoy being right. I deleted it because not every accusation deserves a room in my house. In September, Teresa invited me to meet the first 2 scholarship recipients. I almost said no. Then I remembered that hiding had helped build the wound in the first place. So I went. One student was a woman in her 40s who had spent 15 years doing office work for a contractor and wanted to become an inspector. The other was a young man whose father poured concrete. They both shook my hand carefully because donors make people nervous. I told them not to thank me too much. Just don't sign what you know is wrong. The woman laughed. The young man did not. He nodded like he had already seen the kind of pressure I meant. On the drive home, Claire texted, Teresa posted a picture. Mom would have liked the woman in the red jacket. There was no question after it, no request, no mention of Evan. I pulled over before answering because I did not trust myself to type while the road blurred. I wrote, she would have asked her 3 questions and sent her home with food. Claire answered with 1 word. Yes. That was all. It was not a reunion. The daughter I had imagined at her wedding had never existed. The one I had was learning, slowly and with cost, to come without a bill in her hand. The blue folder stayed in my desk. Paid wedding statement, seating chart, wire instructions, old report copy. I kept it because facts had carried me when love tried to make me foolish. People ask sometimes whether I forgave Claire. They want a clean answer because clean answers make family stories easier to swallow. I tell them I opened the door on Tuesdays. I did not reopen the account. My name is still Hale. At my daughter's wedding, she made it sound small. Then an old report, a stranger's memory, and one refused signature reminded everyone, including me, that a name can be quiet for years and still hold. The money did not buy Claire a townhouse. It bought 2 students their first year in a trade that punishes care until care saves someone. Nina's name sits on the award letter. Mine sits under the pledge. And my daughter, when she comes, knocks first.